Hi, Dan. It says that you're there. I can't see you and I can't hear you, but it says you're there.
Hello.
Hello, Dan.
Hey,
Hi.
how are you?
Okay. We're the
Good.
early.
Oh. Just trying to get straightened out here.
Sure.
So have many people signed up yet or logged in?
No, you and I are the only ones logged in.
Okay.
The list of potential attendees is nice and long because we just add anybody.
Oh,
They express an interest or have attended one of the others, or those two
Mhm.
times. But the actual attendance tends to be pretty small, but they
Yeah.
are recorded.
Yeah.
And
All right. I thought just to essentially introduce the goals and the vision and a brief history of
Yeah.
the plan and the value the plan has for the work that is to be done,
That's
and then find out what people want to know,
yes. Okay.
and work with questions. I found that usually works pretty well for me. I mean, I can run down and just read the existing facilities. Everyone's read this material.
Yes.
And hopefully I can talk about how this document relates to all sorts of other things, like the state's recreation plan, how it's a tool for our acquisition purposes, as it's a tool for really
Yeah.
so many things.
Knowing what the value of the comprehensive plan is one of the questions that we have in the past at least asked the conversation leaders to talk about.
Okay.
Partly because we're going through this process of reading the comprehensive plan, and that makes us rare individuals. And
Right.
so why should anyone pay any attention to the comprehensive plan, or what value is it? So that is a good thing to hit on. Hi,
Good.
Bob.
I want to. Who's that? Someone else sign on?
Yes, Bobby Williams.
Morning. Good morning. I'm coming in from Hawaii.
Are you really?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
We're in Oahu.
Oh.
Yeah, and luckily you had a 3 o'clock in the afternoon session, because I couldn't make the other, anything in the mornings that you might have. So this is good.
What time is it there?
9 o'clock.
9. Oh, good.
Yeah.
So my went with us, and we all went to Hawaii to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. But that was 8 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was
Well,
our exciting trip.
We're here because of our daughter, and she's gotten reassigned here. So she's getting ready to take over a new command, and so we're coming in for the ceremony. So we're just here, yeah,
Oh,
and
that's
to
exciting.
see the grandsons.
Oh, yes.
Hey, Pat.
Okay, Pat Cochran has
Hi.
joined.
And I have to say, I did for the last hour and a half read over the part of the comprehensive plan that we're supposed to be reviewing. Wow, what an element yeah, I can see how you have to try to put it into everything, as you were saying, of the developments.
It's got a long wish list, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can you hear me with this mic?
Mhm, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. I think it'll cut down some of the, there's a swimming pool real close by that's pretty popular right now, and it can get crowds.
What I find is it's important for all the rest of us to mute. So I'm certainly going to do that now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'll unmute to preview a question I'd like to ask Dan when you get to the questions.
Okay.
Don't start with this by any means, but I live here on the edge of the university, and Darden Graduate Business School is about to do a huge building project, tearing down some, building new, and it includes an arboretum. Right next to that, the university has bought the apartments called Ivy Gardens. They're tearing them all down and building them more densely, and then building a very nice green swath right through the middle. And other places at the university, of course, are uncovering the stream, above grounding, whatever it's called. So there are increasingly nice places, at least in the future, to walk around the university. But I don't know whether any of that ever gets to discussed with the city or the county. You know, is Parks or Recreation ever talk to the university and vice versa? So that's a question maybe for later.
Okay, good. I'll be right back. Are we going to start right at 3? I'll be right back. Grab some.
We can talk among ourselves. Uh-oh.
Tell them where you are, Bobby.
I'm in Oahu. I will give you a little tour of my view while we're waiting. How's that? I don't know how's that for waking up in the morning?
Pretty nice.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Oahu.
Why?
On Oahu. I'm going to sit here and try to put something with, oh, my husband over here in the corner. Ta-da. I'm going to try to get a little less light. And I'll sit over here if this works. Okay.
That Hawaiian light.
It's
An island
hard,
light.
you know. Somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So I could start if and people could just join in maybe.
Yeah, our chairman isn't yet with us, Muriel, but
Oh.
we don't usually have a long introduction. I think
Yeah.
that we've told people ahead of time that you are the is it Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn? I get the two characters. You're the one who's gotten more people working more miles of trail in the county than anybody else ever, as well as being in the Parks and Recreations Department for how many years?
Well, it was about 25 years, just about. And I retired just recently, just a few months ago. But yeah, it's been, we started from scratch, pretty much. When I was in community development, working there when that plan came out, the first comp plan I worked on was the one that laid the foundation for the green infrastructure. At that point, there were no trail plans. There wasn't even trails really mentioned in our parks. The Rivanna Trails Foundation, which I had been working with, I've been on their board for a while before jumping into this, had a trail along the river. And there had been some minor efforts. There was, I found an old sign that I can't remember her name who worked on it, that had Rivanna Greenway down near Dardentown Park. But there really wasn't really trails on the ground. People were, I don't know where they were hiking. But yeah, so we got into the comprehensive plan and should I just jump into this? Am I jumping into it? I'll wait.
The story I like to tell is of a survey that was done. I like to tell it because it shows that people's opinion do make a difference. There's people speaking up or taking part in surveys can make a difference. And as I tell the story, and you can sure correct me, but the director of Parks and Recreation was constantly being hounded for more soccer fields and all of the kinds of field sports. But this survey came out and it turned out the leading thing that people wanted were trails and passive type of recreation. And that changed the direction that the department took. So as I say, you can correct me, but that's my picture of what happened. And it does show the power that citizens can have.
Well, you know, it's interesting because there's actually a little more to that story. Because when I came down from community development, carrying the comp plan, the Greenway plan, there was some skepticism. There was a bit of resistance. There was like, what I was bringing just didn't fit into the way Parks and Rec had currently been operating, and there was a meeting at one point between the city and the county and the RTF. I think John Conover initiated it, where they were looking for a champion for trails in the county. And I'd been working on them for a while. My background, my research, my thesis in landscape architecture was outdoor recreation, universal design and forest recreation, which involved circulation and everything. So I had a good solid background. I was doing site plan review and subdivision review in parks. In the community development. So David Benish and I and Wayne, we talked and talked with Pat. And so essentially the plan was adopted and I carried it from downstairs to upstairs at that time. And was sitting in this little office there, and the consultant who was putting together the survey was in the office. They were trying to figure out what things that they wanted to have included on the survey. And I reviewed it, and there was no questions on the survey about trails, walkability, bikes. It wasn't even on the survey. That's how far removed it was from from the conversation. And I said, it would be really nice if you could put trails and walkability and access to natural areas in there. And it blew them away. And when the results came back, it was like the number one, it was the biggest request that came in. And no one had really thought about it. It's something that had been taken for granted. There was so much demand at that time for soccer fields and active playgrounds, and we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres of really incredible natural area, public lands that didn't have access. People just weren't getting out into it. Now, I will say that there were a few people, when I started working at Mint Springs, there were a few people who had their own trails and they owned them. They were very protective and very secretive about them and were enjoying them. But there was no signage, there was no maps, there was nothing to inform the general public that there was recreational trails out there. And so that was a big shift, and it was a big surprise for everyone. It was a great boost to what I was doing. It certainly sent me, off running like crazy to meet the demand. But yeah, that was a good story. It was interesting that I think that we weren't the only ones. I mean, Roanoke at that point had a greenway system on the ground that was pretty robust and pretty well used. It was a result of flooding. It was an Army Corps of Engineer project that got that started. They were doing work on the Roanoke River and included a greenway in that. But other than that, there wasn't much else out there. Well, of course, the Appalachian Trail was there. So we jumped right into it, and the comprehensive plan at that point in time included, actually, the first Greenway plan was much more natural resource conservation protection. Most of the trails were in riparian areas along rivers and creeks. These are all areas that were either left over or known to be left over or were considered protected with the water quality ordinance. And so we knew that those corridors would be open to work with. We also knew that those corridors weren't of value to, in the development area, we knew that those corridors weren't of value to the developer, and it made it fairly easy for us to negotiate dedications. And the biggest tool I had when I went to the table with the development community was the comprehensive plan, to show them that this is there. And at that time, we could see proffers. And, I'd say 99% of what we have on the ground currently for greenways is we didn't pay for any of it. It was all part of negotiations with the development community or gifts. I actually went door to door, like asking to borrow a cup of sugar and pan tops, and just knocking on doors saying, look, you've got this greenway, you've got this property down along the river that is not of use to your business, and it could really enhance this future program. And a few people just went right ahead and dedicated. Some realized that they could hold on to it for a bargaining tool for future development negotiations. But I was very surprised that the businesses that said, sure, we can support that. State Farm was the biggest one that we got a large dedication there without, they didn't have any development plans under review or anything like that, that sort of put the issue on the table. I just went, knocked on the door and met with them and said, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And again, using the comprehensive plan as the tool, you know, they gave us a significant section of riverfront. So the value of these plans has been really, really important as far as initiating, putting these desires, these amenities on the ground, getting grants. This is one of the first things I cite in the grant proposal. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The community is supportive of it. And that's a really powerful tool, not just for greenways and trails, but also the parks, the regional parks, the district parks, the community parks. When it comes to seeking those park properties, having that recognized and in the plan, having the need recognized through the recreation surveys has been a really big part of it. I think, is anybody out there? Any questions? Hello.
Hello.
It's
Hey.
hard for us to mute, which is best for sound quality, and also give you the little that you'd like.
Yeah,
along the
yeah.
way. But we're here. There are about 9 of us
Okay.
here.
Oh, good, good. Who's there? Who's out there?
I'm Pat Cochran. I'm president of the League of Women Voters.
Okay.
I'm Mimi Bender. I'm a long-term league member and joined this because I live in Albemarle County and care about what the plan is going to do for the next 5 years once they get to the next revision.
Great.
I'm Muriel Grimm. Sorry, I'm a little late. I'm having problems with my other computer and couldn't get to this one.
Yeah. Well, glad you're here.
I'm Josh Press Williams, and I work for the Piedmont Environmental Council, so I'm standing in here to learn.
Okay, cool. Cool. Done a lot of work with the Piedmont Environmental Council.
Cool.
Yeah, they've really, in more recent times, they've really become a really strong partner, which is good. And I think that they will continue to emerge as a good partner. Who else is out there?
Hey, Dan, it's Jim Andrews. We've met before. I'm actually running for the supervisor seat. Liz Palmer is stepping down, and I'm here to work.
Okay, you've got an exciting area, a lot of potential out there, a lot of interesting and a lot of big questions in that area for future recreation development. Good. Well, it's very helpful for me to know who I'm talking to. I've never been a blogger or someone who just speaks into the darkness. I really do like to exchange, and to me, it makes a much more interesting and maybe informative discussion.
Linda,
Sure,
and Carol, why don't you say who?
I'm Linda Goodling, and I'm in the Natural Resource Committee of the League.
Okay.
And also, I met you because you were balancing those rocks at the Crozet Library.
Oh yeah. That's something that keeps me off the streets.
It's harder than it looks.
It is. Actually, Sally, you did some rock balancing with me one time, didn't you?
Yes.
At Baker Butler School.
And I love to see, sometimes when you're just driving around the county or elsewhere, you'll see a little pile of rocks very
Mhm.
carefully. And I always wonder if that's your handiwork or one of your descendants, who it is. Little pile.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting activity that there are certain people just kind of drawn to it.
Carol?
I'm Carol Cutler. I'm coming in late, so I apologize. Linda and I are both in the Rivanna Master Naturalist group, and I'm a Vice President, League of Women Voters. Very interested in what you have to say today.
Okay, great.
And I'm Bobby Williams. I'm the only non-Albemarle County participant because we live in the city, but I'm gleaning everything I can because the city and the county have to work together on this.
Yes.
And my husband, Peyton Williams, is listening in on over here too, and he's involved with the senior statesman and everybody else that's involved in the Master Naturalist. So, yeah,
Great.
you've got more ears than you think on you.
Well, good.
Bobby, are you joining us from Hawaii?
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Good. Welcome.
Right. Let's see, there's one more. One more person. I thought.
Nope.
No. Okay. All right. I think that's your crowd.
Okay. Well, so hopefully most of you have had a chance to read the section, and I don't want to go back page by page, word by word through it. But if there's areas, what I'd like for you to do is if there's anything in these sections that you have questions about or you'd like to comment about, that's what I think would be a really productive way of having this discussion. A lot of what's in the plan is addresses needs that have come up through surveys from the public. But I will say that one reason why I've really enjoyed this work and one reason why I think it's so valuable is that when you're looking at green infrastructure, when we're looking at the land that's going to be left over after development comes through, that these areas will be preserved and protected. And from what I've learned, what I've observed is that, our development corridors, the commercial corridors, the areas where a lot of the light industrial commercial areas, they're ever changing, and it's kind of a franchise world. The image, you can drive down Route 29 and then drive down into Fredericksburg or someplace, and you're going to see the same type of things over and over again. There's some minor nuances here and there. I was an ARB planner for a while, and there was a great deal of interest in trying to keep a unique look, but it's pretty much a franchise landscape along those corridors. For me, the unique thing and the opportunity we have is with these public lands, parklands, greenway, blueway corridors are those places where we can preserve natural and cultural heritage assets. Early on, I approached the plan as more a natural resource protection effort that just happened to have trails involved. There was there was a balance between a huge desire to have more effort in water quality, Chesapeake Bay Act, the riparian landscapes, to make sure that there's biodiversity and that invasive plants, all of these things that are inherent in green infrastructure drove and drives some of this. At one point, it was even more so. But mix that with the desire for people to get out and recreate, to bike, and to mobilate, to travel around is another driver. And actually, recently, that's become much more of an important factor. But early on, it was almost secondary to acquiring and preserving these linear parks, these linear corridors that could be protected with our parks under Parks and Rec stewardship. And I mentioned that because much of what happened, much of the change that happened when this plan was adopted is that the staff, we had to really make a major shift in the park staffing, where stewardship of these landscapes was more than just mowing soccer fields and making sure that we had nice, safe and robust active recreation areas. And I see that evolving even more, where we may be looking for master naturalists to provide training. The more informed our ground level staff are with these things, the better stewards that they can become. But the other thing is the way this plan links in with all the other aspects of the plan, including economic development. There's a huge piece of what you'll read in the economic development section that the recreation plan addresses. The natural resource, the scenic quality, those things are in the recreation plan as well. It's I was involved with the Scenic River Corridor nomination for the upper part of the Rivanna. I think, Sally, you were there too, weren't you? I think she was. By identifying and including that corridor and having it recognized, this became even more of a reason to have that river corridor managed as a scenic resource, recreation resource, and a healthy riparian landscape. Transportation, there are aspects in this plan that sort of straddle that fine line. And this has been an interesting debate between what's alternative transportation initiative and with bikes and what is Parks and Rec. Connecting neighborhoods with paths and trails, and connecting neighborhoods to schools and shopping. Those are all part of the livable communities effort that we've been is incorporated into the plan, and it's something that is considered. Well, health and safety, public health is something that really is something that we were preaching. We were addressing the health, community health value of having passive recreation, more natural areas to have access to. And I tell you, the pandemic really, really brought that home. It was amazing. It was startling how how it became so evident that of all the things that we had to offer, that just having open space, places where people could go and sit and contemplate, sit and gather themselves. It was, well, it was a really emotional thing to see, and also a real challenge because, you know, the Appalachian Trail shut down, a lot of recreation areas totally shut down because they couldn't manage the impact of everyone showing up all at once. And we really made an effort in seeing how important it was, really made an effort to keep them open. We had a lot of staff out there working, just trying to figure out how to keep people safe and yet keep them out there, keep them active. And that was a real affirmation in my mind for the public health, community health value of these greenways and park plans. There's I could go on and on about the values, but that those are areas that are really important, I think, in informing this plan.
Dan, you have a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Linda. I had two questions, and I'll start by saying maybe I'm unaware of some of the things that have happened since the plan, but I noted that there were a couple of areas that were designated for study. And I know that the tunnel out in Crozet is open, but there was a three-notched area study planned for, didn't know what was happening with that. And there was also a goal of interconnecting rural area parks, and they seem pretty well spread out in different parts of the county. And I was wondering what has happened, any progress on that? And I guess there's a third one, the areas that are now that have been added or you think are going to be added for study for further park or trail or greenway development.
Well, we made sure that those study areas were in the plan because we anticipated, you know, once the tunnel was opened up, that there needed to be a connection from the tunnel down to Crozet. I served on the board of the tunnel project for a long time, and it was a real desire to make that connection. And the same with Three Notch Trail. You know, in 2008, when the economy went down and we had folks calling every day wanting to ride bikes from Crozet into town. It was a great motivation to do that. Since then, the community has been inspired by looking at some of the other statewide trail systems, like the Cap to Cap Trail, these big projects. So we made sure that those study areas were designated and identified so that if there was movement or an opportunity to consider something along that corridor, then we wouldn't have to do a comp plan amendment. We wouldn't have to take it back for further review. There's a project right now down in Esmont where they're looking at a Rails to Trails project, that there isn't a designated study area. And so in that case, you know, there needs to be a comp plan review done to make sure that it's compatible and it's something that the community wants. But those study areas were placeholders. Now, I will say that, and many people can look at those and go, well, you know, there's been no movement on these projects. When you look at the priorities that Parks has right now, there's some huge priorities that need to be addressed. And I'm thinking about Biscuit Run. right now that is a massive project. It'll be the largest park brought online. It will serve passive recreation, bikes, and the much needed demand for active recreation fields. It's just what our carrying capacity is for taking on these new projects. Trail from Charlottesville to Crozet is going to be a big deal, and the same with the one up to the tunnel. It's just going to be a matter of when the community decides there's a large enough demand and the opportunity is there to do it. There are people really working on that though right now, currently. The 3 Notch Trail.
How about interconnectivity of the rural parks?
What's that? Oh, connectivity to the rural parks?
Yeah.
There is a rural bike plan that addresses some of that, but as far as building off-road bike ped trails to make those connections, I think it's going to be a while before we see anything like that. And in some cases, it's just not going to be feasible. Like Byram Park is so far out there, and that road is so difficult to imagine folks riding bikes on. I don't foresee anything happening there anytime soon. Same with Pretty Creek. Now, Pretty Creek is one of our biggest biking destinations now. It's a very popular cycling park, but it's also so far out there that a project that would put bike lanes or separate trails out there will be huge. I imagine that it's going to happen one day, but I don't see it happening anytime really soon. Walnut Creek Park, we've looked at ways of connecting that park through Biscuit Run in the past, or improving Old Lynchburg, or the routes out there so more people could ride. But also Ragged Mountain, the city's park, there are opportunities that have come along where the possibility of a joint collaborative effort between the city and the county could put some safe bike routes out there. That one's close enough into town that you could really see people riding out there too.
Is there still a legal action lawsuit or something between the city and the county about the use, what can be used at the Ragged Mountain Reservoir?
There is. I don't think that's been resolved since I left. That's still out there, but the city has acquired, and what I should have said, the city has acquired property adjacent to that. They've put in a number of miles of trails that are bikeable. They're not on the reservoir property. So yeah, some of that larger connectivity is going to be a real challenge. The other thing I'll mention is the 3 Notch Trail is being conceived of as a trail that would connect from Richmond all the way up through Charlottesville and over into the valley. But another large effort that's been in the works for a long time is the James River Heritage Trail, which is another ambitious project linking Richmond to Lynchburg. It's going to be inch by inch, mile by mile on those projects, but having them in the comp plans, actually, I will say that when I first went to the table with the state on the James River Heritage Trail, we were the only county that had that river corridor section already in our comp plan. Other counties, Fluvanna, Goochland, others that were part of that had to follow with that, but we had already put that together. But that's going to be a challenge too, because much of that corridor is owned by CSX, and CSX has been really challenging. They're nice people, but there has been a challenge to work within those corridors. Yeah. I think the group down in Esmond is currently working with the CSX and looking at how to purchase some of that corridor. But it's a private rail, and it's real estate that they sell.
Somewhat connected to the rural connecting trails, Bobby just posted a question in the chat box on whether there are any plans to connect Nelson, to connect with the trails in Nelson County.
Well, at one point, we were looking really strongly at, well, the James River Heritage Trail would do that. It would accomplish that. The 76 bike route goes through Nelson County and Albemarle, and that's one link that could, be put together as a designated road bike route. But the majority, the other trails in Nelson County are on the western side. We have talked about, there was talk about a trail up the Rockfish River around Schuyler, mainly because much of that river is in the VDOT corridor. And there may be an easy opportunity to do something along there. These are all projects that, since I've retired, I'm trying to make sure that some of these nuanced, these smaller opportunities that aren't getting a lot of attention right now, that they are still being looked at. Another one that I've been interested in seeing is a connection from Chris Green Lake down Jacobs Run. We have a river corridor dedication on the North Fork from UREF that would be a significant recreational opportunity. It may not connect, the North Fork Trail may not go as far as we originally anticipated, but it would open up a number of miles of riverfront, maybe even a boat access, and connect Chris Green to that growing population up there. But that's one of them that just sort of is not a squeaky wheel at this point. And I think that's an important thing. And I've almost thought I'd like to, while these things are still fresh in my head, meet with the supervisors from each one of these districts that I know pretty well, and just inform them of opportunities that I'm aware of that aren't, top of the discussions right now. I think that could be useful. The county has a real asset with Tim Padalino, who has come on board. He came down like I did from community development, and he's championing the greenway acquisition and the trails and working with the developers. And he's very adept, and I think he'll do a really good job with it.
There's a question in the chat box about more launching sites, and certainly Blue Ways is something you were interested in too. But what's our waterways like for?
Yeah, that was the one thing that was my swan song, was getting Brook Hill, getting that launch site up on Route 29 opened up. Boy, we worked on that thing for 15 years. It just, some of these connections, some of these efforts just take patience and patience, and stubborn determination to just make sure it happens. But that one launch site opened up the river for a huge distance. Now we have a piece of ground that's county owned down in Buck Island. It's almost at the Savannah County border, and the future potential for that would be boat landing, and recreation site. There's enough acres there for it to be a destination in itself. But again, when you sift through the priorities, that doesn't make it to the top as, say, Biscuit Run or now with the bridge across the Rivanna connecting to Willow Mills. That's going to be another one that is, Sally, I don't know if you remember, we've been talking about that one for 20 years. That connection, and it's amazing that it's finally starting to come together.
Yeah, I am amazed. One of the things that we at the Lewis and Clark Exploratory Center have found is that the Rivanna River, that used to be regarded as a fine, family-friendly, quiet little river, occasionally can become really dangerous. And it has reduced programs that we offer. And I wondered if in general we're finding that our waterways are more dangerous, or if that is reducing, or if people are just plowing forward and tubing and doing things on the river anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Water recreation is a challenge. I mean, I grew up on a beach on the Chesapeake Bay where some days it was just as calm as could be, and other days there was a hurricane and the house across the street would get washed away. The water has got, especially river water, has got a really remarkable ability to just change overnight. And that's something that we've been working with signage, within educating people. The Rivanna River Company is been a really good partner for the Rivanna, getting people out there. They've been really responsible about educating folks, and for novices and people that aren't comfortable, I think having that type of guidance is important. But it's been a challenge. We've asked about putting signage, asked about putting information out, and it's sort of a legal issue and a liability to make statements about the safety of the river. I think what we've put out and what most places do is just put common sense, life jackets and everything. But as far as the height of the river or how fast it's moving, it's something that I think we're working with. Fortunately, we really haven't had a lot of, we've seen a lot of new use, a lot of folks out there, and very few issues or incidences that I'm aware of. We've got a great water rescue team out that's available. The other thing is not only the water's dynamic, but also the bacteria blooms. At some point, every now and then, the river, it just gets hot long enough that there are, it's dangerous to be in the water because of the bacteria. And that's something we're learning about too.
How about the hydrilla? When I was, everything I know is at least a dozen years old, but the hydrilla had was threatening to clog up the Rivanna Reservoir and reduce the amount of space that could be used for the rowing teams, crew, and all
Yeah.
raceway. And then they brought in some grass-eating carp that did a marvelous job. But I don't know if that's continued, or do you know where that's?
Yeah, that's RWSA would be the folks to address that. I know that at Beaver Creek, there were grass carp out there, and in Mint Springs. We put them in a couple places where it got pretty dense, and it was fairly successful. The funny thing is, I was at Orvis one day and saw that they sell flies that look like the grass, that people were catching them. And I was that it looked just like the little piece of grass. The ones we had at Mint Springs, because I couldn't keep up with the ones at Beaver Creek, but the ones at Mint Springs got quite large, and we're doing a pretty good job. But that's one of the things with climate change, with these heated up weather patterns and everything, and also just more development contributing, is making it more and more challenging. It's a question that every summer we're looking at. I think 2 years ago, maybe, there was a dog at the dog park at Chris Green Lake that became really sick and died from licking its fur after being in the water. And so our waters, our recreation waters, are monitored quite carefully.
RCA, the Ravenna Conservation Line, monitors them about 40 streams and the river. The river
Yep.
bacterial monthly, and they publish it, but I don't think it comes out in the papers quickly enough to probably get people to prevent them from going in.
They do it weekly in 2
So
spots.
it needs to be shouted louder.
They really do a really good report. The Riverkeeper, and I'm really impressed with the community of the resources and that have come together around that. I was on that board for a long time, way back, and been working closely with them. And this is the thing to make this concept of these greenways and blueways corridors work, especially in these riparian areas. The partnerships are so important. PEC recently sent a crew out to rebuild the structure at Milton. And if any of you have gone down the river and taken out at Milton, or missed Milton altogether because he couldn't see it, they did a very good job of helping out there. There are some long-range plans maybe to totally redo that launch site because of popularity, and it's just really difficult to get cars in and out. It's amazing to...
Right. I was going to ask my question about whether the University of Virginia and its properties are, and what conversations, there used to be a planning and coordinating council that brought city, county, and university together, and it's very drastically changed in the last year and no longer includes elected officials at all. So I don't know its future, but how about from your departmental point of view, were you able to coordinate with even be aware of what the university was doing in terms both of its property and its recreation and things like
Well,
building a new arboretum?
Yeah, there was a regular meeting, and this is a number of years back, that Chris Chinzik and I participated in that involved the university. And there may still be, but I just haven't been privy to them. I do think that, the Arboretum in Charlottesville, the new Piedmont Arboretum, and what UVA is doing, I have really hoped to see a time where there's programmatic connections between those efforts and our outlying rural area parks and the riparian. I just think that there could be maybe not a direct connection, but a virtual or some sort of link between what is happening in those parks or the arboretums out into the parks. Lewis and Clark Center is another site or another effort that I do think that stronger partnerships with some of these efforts could really be an asset for everybody. Oftentimes the competing projects, programs are competing against each other, but I just think that there could be more of a unified vision on some of these. And I'm hopeful that the university will, with its arboretum, there's such an untapped opportunity with the faculty and student resources that come through our town that could be more engaged. I recently worked with the art department for, there's an interesting outdoor sculpture exhibit at Pantops at the Kluge Center that was just put together overnight, and it's some very interesting, remarkable things that the students brought. They're not going to be up. I think they'll be taken down at the end of the summer. But I think that we need to reach out more and connect with the university. I kept trying to recruit students for projects, and a lot of them will say, well, I'm doing something in South Africa, or I'm going to somewhere exotic. I was like, but you're in Appalachia. This is exotic. I mean, I tried to sell it, but they had all great projects. I just was trying to get the faculty to focus. Here's something I would just like to throw out there. Bridges, the cost of bridges, the design of bridges is one of the big challenges in pulling these corridors together. And if there's anyone out there hearing my voice, listening to this, I presented to the School of Engineering and Architecture that there could be a bridge competition, design competition annually, that the winning bridge would get built. And to me, it would be a really fascinating way to integrate the resources, the evolving thinking, the materials, new materials. And each year there could be a bridge that's a testament to new design thinking. I just couldn't get it to take traction. Maybe the PEC could do it, or someone.
Are you thinking of animal corridor bridges or people bridges?
Yeah,
or
people bridges. Yep.
Bridges. Yeah, because the animal corridor bridges are really starting to be looked at a lot by transportation having to deal with the amount of roadkill that is deductible to the traveling public. So,
Yeah, I know that VDOT, there was a little bridge project in Ivy where bear passage, wildlife passage was brought up. It's interesting how each new generation of professionals that comes out there brings progressive, evolving thinking to these things. I mean, we have a salamander tunnel.
I'm going to mention the salamander.
Yeah, and it's the developer's proud of it. It's for some people it's laughable. I've been out there on the nights when the salamander do that migration, and it's remarkable. The people that turn out, and just there's quite a salamander party that happens out there. But it's an important thing.
You got to look at Sally's cat.
Oh, that's okay.
Cat just left.
Pretty.
Any other questions?
Well,
I have,
carry on.
go ahead, Sally.
Oh, I was thinking of special needs people because I live in a community where a lot of people walk with their walkers, pushing their walkers around, or others are pushing other people in wheelchairs. But you don't have to be elderly to be in a special category. And I know that sometimes parents will develop a playground just for their special needs child. But in general, I didn't see a lot of, well, you tell us, is this something that ought to be emphasized more?
Well, yeah, we have a transition plan or an accessibility plan that has been done. We had a consultant look at all of our parks and look at our accessibility needs. And what we're doing is just incrementally, every new project that comes along, or when something needs to be repaired, we repair it or upgrade it so that it makes it accessible. It's not like it's a major initiative. It's just incremental when there's an opportunity to do something. If it's a matter of, if there's an opportunity where there's a level loop trail that could be graded and paved so that it could open up to wheelchair access, we do that. And that's something that's really important. The boomer generation is not getting younger, and it's. I will have to say that as a member of that group, this next generation is not going to be happy to sit on a porch with a rocking chair, and it's going to be a very active group of cohorts, I guess, and we're seeing that a lot of folks out there recreating, staying active much longer, and the accommodations oftentimes are really simple things, but it's about awareness. It's about being aware, so that when a contractor is doing something, sometimes it's the level of detail in construction where you just have a difference in elevation on a piece of where asphalt meets concrete can be a barrier, and just having that awareness, that consciousness. That, as I mentioned earlier, that was my thesis work with in grad school at Virginia Tech, and I assessed every developed recreation site in the Jefferson and the George Washington National Forest and came up with a transition plan for them. And actually went and presented to the Department of Interior in DC with how the work can be done in a way that didn't destroy, say, old CCC historical sites, didn't pave the wilderness. That was the biggest question people had. You're not going to pave the wilderness, are you? But it's really about just being conscious of new projects and fixing old ones.
Well, it is written in the comprehensive plan. They've got an
Yeah.
ADA requirement for full access, the OPDMDs, they call them,
Well, yeah, and that's an interesting thing. The OPDMD is the Department of Justice has put this out there as kind of a motivator, but the way that law is written is that if you don't have accessible trails or accommodations, then a person with a demonstrated disability, and they don't even have to demonstrate that they have a disability, can take a motorcycle, can take an ATV, can take a pickup truck onto a trail. Yeah, that's something that has been a real challenge for a lot of land managers on how to work with that. But what we've done is we've evaluated all of our trails and have on file how accessible they are. So if someone does have a desire to get into an area, they can actually just contact the office and find out before they pack up their car and make a big effort to get to a place and find out that they can't go anywhere there. But yeah, and also the technology around mobility, the equipment, and wheelchairs aren't what they used to be. I've worked with fly fishermen that roll their wheelchairs out in the middle of the stream and fish from their chairs. A lot of the veterans are still, they have disabilities, they really want to be active. And there's some pretty athletic folks out there that are our customers.
I had some very different topic to ask questions on. As I was reading through the chapter, there was an awful lot about inventorying how much land is available for this and that. And so it brought back to my mind several questions. First of all, there seem to be so many different groups doing inventories of how much land is available for X, Y, or Z. And I'm wondering whether these inventories would get in your way. But I'd also, I guess I'm a little more interested too in just knowing about the process, because I was wondering, first of all, if all the inventorying that they were talking about in the 2015 comprehensive plan, if this has sort of come to fruition. And secondly, how often do you really need to inventory regarding future sites of things like parks? Isn't that pretty much cast in stone, or is it something that changes?
Well, in the growth areas, it's something that changes, and that's where a lot of attention, a lot of dedication needs to be made. When a shopping mall becomes obsolete and is removed, if you look at the small area plans for the hydraulic area, for Rio, those studies are really looking for opportunities that may not be available now, but may possibly emerge from just the total rethinking of one of the big box areas. That's where the real attention needs to be paid, is in the growth areas where demand is going to grow and competition for pieces of land, is going to be high between what's developable and what needs to be retained. But it was really interesting, the conversations I've been involved with future urban planning, is that everyone agrees that the bike ped connectivity, linear parks, those things need to be integrated into what will be livable, desirable communities. And a lot of it is informed by what's happening out there in the rest of the world. We're able to visit a lot of places that are doing this work. And there are some remarkable things happening, like the High Bridge, the railroad trestle in New York City that has turned into such a popular park. Some of the efforts that there was a mention of wildlife corridors or wildlife connectivity over highways. Some of those are really elegant. Some of them are being done that are really remarkable, and they're actually creating parks over a highway. I keep wondering where their budget comes from, where they're getting the money from. And yeah, somebody tell me these bridges that they're building in China, how is that? There's some amazing structures, and sometimes we have the hardest time just getting a little 30-foot bridge across a creek, and it's phenomenal. Some of how recreational design, recreational amenity, and tourism activity has become such a priority in other parts of the world. I see this bridge across the Rivanna connecting Woolen Mills to Pantops as being a first step in realizing not just the bike ped connectivity, but the economic value, the livability value, the folks that can commute to. We've got a couple of big employment centers up at Pantops that folks could ride bikes to. There's so many ways of looking at the value of that connection, other than just a pedestrian footbridge crossing the river. And I think that's one of the things that's so important about the comp plan in general, is to, when you flip through this section and then you flip through transportation, housing, all the others, the relationships really highlight, or to bring forward the relationships between each one of these sections. I was writing a grant proposal one time, and I was trying to express the value of funding for a greenway section. It was like everything in the county's list of amenities, aspirations, everything else is like, yeah, we're doing, that's there. One thing though, I don't see so much of, and it's sort of a problem that I personally took an interest in and have been concerned about, is the homeless populations. A lot of these leftover places that are becoming public access, becoming public parks, and we're inviting families and people to come down to, have long been sanctuaries for homeless folks. And really I had to address that at Pantops. And there aren't any real easy answers, and I haven't, every now and then it comes up as a law enforcement thing, but I do think it's more of a public health, social services issue. And I would like to see that addressed in the future. If someone were to ask me, what as citizens, what can we do to help move these plans forward or make them better? That's just one of them that isn't being directly addressed in any real workable way that I think shouldn't be overlooked. I've looked at examples all across the country and Europe on how to how to be deal with that with compassion, firm compassion, whatever it takes. But it's a real problem. And I don't think it's going to get much better anytime soon. I will say I have to share this quick story with you. There was a section along the Rivanna River at Pantops that I wanted to have dedicated as part of the overall system. And the owner was holding out for a development project, but I noticed that there was about a dozen people living there. There was a camp there that they put up, there was chimneys, they had latrines dug. Those people were living there. They were laundry. I mean, I went in there one time and it was like a village. There was laundry hung out to dry and people just coming and going. And this is right up at Pantops. And there was a perception that the trails were inviting them just because they could walk there from the shopping center. And that was brought to my attention. I said, we don't own that trail. It hasn't been dedicated to us. However, if you dedicate it to us, we can then take responsibility for it. And I got a dedication within a month, pretty much, just based on. And then I thought, you know what? Maybe I should take troops of homeless people and just set them up in different places. Well, you've got a problem we can help you with. Just dedicate this area. I don't think it would work that often, but we were able to get our staff out there and keep an eye on things. And what we've been doing with that is a tough love approach. Is if you see a camp, we would hang not a ticket, but a little information, laminated piece of information that says you've got 2 days to move your camp. You're in a park, and if your camp is not gone in 2 days, we'll gather it up and store it at Dardental Park, the contents of it. And because a lot of people get put in jail, something happens, and we're as staff, we've been looking down, going, this is the remnants of someone's life. This is their personal, the last of the personal things that they might have. And I thought it was just a good approach to contain it and let them know that it's available if they do in fact want to come back and get it. But we found prescription bottles that you figure somebody would need, family photographs, everything. There is no one homeless population. There's so many different reasons why people are out there. From adventurers to folks that have just fallen through more cracks than you and I have ever seen. Anyway, that's something that I have been on teams. I've worked with the city and the county police, city police. Periodically, there's this effort that it comes to the fore, and then it just sort of it ebbs and flows. But it would be good to see something really concrete come out of addressing that.
What do you think, Muriel? Have we reached the end of our usual time?
Yeah, we're getting close, so I guess we could just see, does anyone else have any more questions or comments or anything?
Well, I'll be a devil's advocate here, or mention the elephant in the room or something. I don't know what term to use, but it happened at Ivy Creek area a few years ago. But gay men, particularly, often feel there's no place for them to have casual hookups any better than out in nature. And what better place than to have some place where there's parking and also out in nature. And it usually is something mutually agreed upon, but really horrifying if little kids come upon two men vigorously having sex.
Yeah.
So is there, talk about homeless is kind of a difficult subject, but boy, is this a difficult subject. Is there,
Yeah,
anything that's happening that is helping? I know at least one man whose life was really majorly horribly impacted by the crackdown by the police that time out at Ivy Creek. And so I am not in favor of that or thinking that's a solution. On the other hand, at Dardentow, we know we don't want kids to come upon stray men. What, any words of wisdom?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question, and it's a challenging one. I do think by much of that history and those activities happened before the trails were really legitimized, before maps were out, before signage. I think once you put signage out and maps and have regular users, we saw a transformation at Chris Green Lake because I think that activity moved from Chris Green as a whole from Ivy Creek to Chris Green Lake. And as we were building that dog park and opening up the couple miles of trails back there, putting the signage out, having it identified as a managed destination, I stopped seeing evidence of, and I don't know where, it's one of those things that like the homeless camps. At times I've thought, boy, isn't there someone with private property around that could just create a sanctuary for homeless people to go and camp, or a sanctuary for people to gather that aren't, that's outside the public realm. But I know it still goes on, but not like it was a number of years back. And again, in my thinking, it's really due to legitimizing the culture of trail use that sort of come forward, that these are not leftover places where you can go and expect to be discreet yeah, it's a good question, Sally. But I haven't seen evidence or heard the kind of complaints that were happening at Ivy Creek and at Chris Green when we first started working out there.
Yeah, good. Well, don't know what kind of answer I was expecting because it's not a
Yeah.
not an easy answer any more than the homeless encampments. But
Yeah.
it does show how all-encompassing the issue of simply parks and recreation is. We've touched on almost the whole comprehensive plan now in one chapter.
One little
So, go ahead.
one little part in the comprehensive plan that they were talking about was the policing in the county and the distribution of policing, you know, as far as if you needed to call somebody, who would you call? And they said they're so tremendously understaffed, but they put them in geographic areas of calling for, you know, alert or help. So I had thought about that from just public safety of any kind, you know, how do you get the police force out? And they you know, focused on it, that it is an issue just because of numbers of, and the size of the county.
I think the geo-policing was a huge change and shift at Pantops when the problem was at its worst with the drunks and the homeless folks, and everyone was down there. When at that time, the officers' schedules were sort of all over the map, and I was constantly meeting new officers and having to introduce them to the whole situation out there. After geopolicing with dedicated folks out there, there was one officer, I wish I remember his name, and I think he became so brilliant that they promoted him on somewhere else. But he took the time, he had a laptop he carried with him with data on each person, their names, so that when he saw them, he knew how to address them, what their issues were. And it just did a remarkable job of connecting with the homeless community. And that to me was a really big shift.
That's extraordinary.
I would like to see more bike policing, and I have to tell you, I mean, these guys, they've had our backs, but I remember one time I needed somebody. I called the police, and they came out, and before they went down on the trail and down to the river, they both pointedly looked at their shoes, which are all nice and shiny and everything, and they were like, "You're not going to make us go down there, are you?" It's like, yeah. So it's not something that's routine for them to get out and get in the weeds with these issues. But I think that the bike policing, I'd love to see that happen again. The other thing is, you know, for much of deterring and catching issues early on, much of that can be done simply with monitoring. Having folks out there who are, if you see a new path off to the side developing, to report it. And the police have had a cadet corps program, and I've voiced this a number of times. Is there some way that we could engage community volunteers and anoint them in a way that they're not intervened, they're not get involved, but just let us know what's happening. I think that would be a real value. And also, I mean, there are people, I've talked to people, I've talked people down out of trees that are so distraught and depressed and ready to end it all. And they've come to the edge of the river just to, that's where I think social workers, if they were, at one point I felt like a hiking social worker, that I was addressing and engaging with so many people that I thought, boy, this is not what I thought greenway park planning was ever going to be. But I think getting someone out there with a good heart and ability to connect with folks would be really helpful. And that could be volunteers.
Speaking of that, reminded me of one other thing I was thinking when I was reading, and it's the problem everybody has. But I was thinking so much of what was in there spoke to needing maintenance, and so I'm wondering how, I guess I should say, how poorly staffed the Parks and Recreation Department is. You know, how is it? Because I see it as something that isn't going to easily get funding, even though everybody loves the parks, the money always goes
Right.
to the emergency.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, what's that situation right now? Basically, how understaffed are they?
We've essentially got 3 staff dedicated to 80 miles of trail. You know, we've got 3 dedicated trail workers that are out there every day somewhere working. Now, that doesn't mean that some of the local staff, say at Mint Springs, might, you know, chip in and everything, but that crew is all over the county, from the Orange County border all the way down to Scottsville. What I've before retiring was really hoping to see would be a really robust volunteer effort put together. We have a great crew of volunteers in Crozet that I was instrumental in pulling together years ago. That really they're citizen workers that are doing a lot of work. They do fundraising, they do 5Ks, they build bridges, they do all sorts of things. But we really need a volunteer coordinator for the whole county. And I think that one position could put so many people to work, it would pay for itself. Because we actually live in a community that a lot of people, you know, we have a good volunteer spirit out there. Just the university alone, the service fraternities I've worked with over the years are remarkable. My God, I've seen kids show up with shorts on, and it's so cold and freezing. I'm hoping the workday will be canceled up on the side of the mountain. And they get out of their car with shorts on. I was like, oh, let's go. It's like, man, I was ready to go home and get some hot chocolate. But we're fairly tapped what this community could bring as far as utilizing volunteers, and I think that's going to be necessary. I hate to say this, and it's weird to say, but we've actually have turned down gifts of property for parks in really remote areas. There was 2 properties in particular. One was way down in Howardsville, where we don't have any staff, and it's so far remote that just having a daily visitation out there would be amazing. And the other one was an area that at that time there was a huge demand for soccer fields. It would have been a perfect site for a soccer field, but it was in the rural areas. And if you know soccer events at all, when one team lets off and another one comes in, the amount of traffic that would be dumped onto these rural roads would just be unrealizable. And we had to turn them down. And I called other localities, said, do you have a process? Do you have a way of actually turning down property as a gift? And people laughed at me. They're like, we don't have that problem at all. But we actually developed a checklist of things that included, you know, we've been offered property that was sketchy, that was landfill. Who knows what was buried there, and we didn't want to own that. But I think understanding the carrying capacity that we have with our hired staff is limited, and what we don't want or what we don't want to see, and I'm saying this now as a private citizen, is that we have parks that are poorly maintained, that are dangerously maintained, that are the amenities aren't cared for. And I've seen that in other park systems where there isn't enough care. You go across a bridge that's got rotted boards and things like that. I don't think we can take on more than we can manage. And I think in order to manage more, it's going to take partnership and volunteers. That's all I have to say about that. I kept asking for Christmas. Every Christmas I said, well, what I want for Christmas is a volunteer coordinator, because the budget would not even allow for us to hire somebody to do that. But it's something that needs to be demonstrated. There are lots of other places, examples of areas that are doing it very well. Friends of Park organizations are big out west. They do a lot of fundraising, they build projects, and pretty much are involved in the management or the visioning of a park.
Well, not that it'll get too much, do too much good, I guess, to get it in writing. But one of the reasons we're going through this exercise of getting familiar with the comprehensive plan is so that we can suggest input to the new comprehensive plan, and that definitely is some input we could suggest. So,
absolutely, to me, that would be such strategic value that could, if managed well, it could meet a lot of areas. For instance, the master naturalist, the stewardship that we need, that our parks could benefit from, to have qualified people volunteering to lead informative walks, to help with our invasive plant problems. That's just one area, but then the cultural heritage area, to have knowledgeable, interested, and able people to volunteer with caring for some of these old home sites, these ruins that are have fascinating stories, but they're all overgrown and clogged with poison ivy and copperheads. Those kind of, if volunteers, the thing about volunteers, if you have something that's of someone's passion or interest, whether it's baseball or pickleball, or any of the active recreation areas, to have a way for people to get involved. Right now, we don't have the door open or the guidance for someone who might, just want to show up and help, maintain an outfield or a pitcher's mound. I don't know what you do. The boat launches. There are river-loving, dedicated people that I think that we could engage more. But to me, that would be a big leap. And then the other thing is just the homeless dealing with the homeless, and you know, we have 4,000, almost 5,000 acres of land that there's so much more programmatic opportunities. It was mentioned that the rock balancing, you know, one of my areas of interest, and now that I'm retired, I hope to get more involved with environmental art, ephemeral art, but our parks could have more of a cultural piece added to them. I'm very interested. We built a little amphitheater at Mint Springs, and I want to start a storytelling activity there with local storytellers that I know in the community. There's a whole cultural piece to our parks that I think we've barely tapped. I was waiting, and I would have had to work till I was 80 years old, I guess, to what I kept thinking of as the icing on the cake for the greenways, you know, which is more that programmatic aspect. And I think that it's the landscapes that we have here are so rich in opportunities for that I think that when we're looking at the things that sort of inform economic development, inform tourism, inform quality of life, and also just that sense of placeness, you know, that sense of knowing the ground around you. I think that we can do a lot more with bringing people to and educating them with these remarkable natural areas that we have. Yeah. So I'm retired. I'm no longer working for the county, but I'm not going to stop working. And if you all know any groups or anybody who wants to listen to ideas or work with me on things like that, let me know. I'm very interested in picking up some of these things that I think that we just, the county just can't get to because of budget and staffing and everything else on their plates.
Yeah, well, I guess that kind of finishes it. And thank you so much for coming. It was really
my pleasure.
marvelous conversation. And
Yeah.
I guess
Thank you.
again, because maybe there's not enough news and money spent on them. The whole park system is just there, and we want to use it, but we never think about it enough.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we appreciate your coming today and talking with us about this chapter. It's been great. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Very much, Dan.
Okay.
Thank-
Anything else, anybody? I can
Hmm.
close it out. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.